word why. What a curious word. The kind of word that can make us cringe, feel defensive, or even distant. But you know, sometimes why is the key that can unlock so much to our lives. Join me as we explore the why with fascinating contributors to the world, those that entertain us, inform us, teach us about life, and if we're lucky, inspire the next in all of us. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and welcome to Headroom, a production of Rainlight and co-produced by Old Soul. Let's go. Boy, I know that I have an opportunity to dictate who I talk to and what an opportunity that is. And so look, selfishly, this is a pod that I wanted to do. I'm a huge sports fan, as some of you know, and maybe it's my way to get away from the world, but I've been that way since I was a kid. And you know what? Today we get to talk to somebody who absolutely has impacted the sports fan in me, the boy in me, that I hope never grows up. And that's Dave Finocchio. He is, he's one of the founders of Bleacher Report. And if you don't know Bleacher Report, you're going to hear this, check it out, and say, how did I not know about Bleacher Report? It's been around for a number of years, and it absolutely changed and really personalized the way in which many of us follow the teams and the players that mean so much to us, not just on a Saturday or a Sunday, but when we think about overcoming an obstacle or reaching a mountain of a professional pursuit. So there's a great affection for Bleacher Report and what Dave and his co-founders built and how that impacted me and my kids and gave rationale for my buddies and I to stay in contact, even though we live in different parts of the country and the world for that matter. But it's not about Bleacher Report. This is about Dave and his co-founders and what they've built at the Cool Down. And I think it's fascinating. The Cool Down, if you don't know, look, 30 million people a month know about the Cool Down. And I felt foolish when I first learned about the Cool Down. How did I not know? I'm someone who's trying to stay up on things, and I'm interviewing people across the globe around sustainability, climate change, impact. What can we do? Generational change, different regions of the world and the way in which they communicate about protecting our planet, saving our planet. And yet Dave and the folks at the Cool Down, they've been around for about 20 months now, and it's just incredible growth. And so we take a deep dive just really into the decision to start the Cool Down. How do you stay apolitical in a very politicized ecosystem or playing field, if you will, going back to the sports metaphor? There's something really likable about Dave. I hope that it comes through in the discussion, the interview here. Just a neat guy who's doing really, really consequential and substantive work. And I'm imagining this is only the beginning. Enjoy. Well, I was just saying off air with our guest that this is, maybe I didn't put in these words, but it's a real treat for me. I will admit there is an addiction that I've had for my entire lifetime, which is sports. And Bleacher Report has played an incredible role in my life. I grew up on Sports Center, and like many of you have or did, and I left that because of Bleacher Report. And ever since Bleacher Report, I have loved sort of, turning my head at a different angle and thinking about sports and the impact it has on people's lives, the way in which we think about just our impact with our kids, coaching, and sort of getting away from the stress of life. And so this is a real treat to spend time with the co-founder of Bleacher Report. And we're not even going to talk about that today, but Dave Finocchio, he was the CEO of Bleacher Report. He is now the co-founder and CEO of the Cool Down. And you know what? I took a flyer. And I don't normally give you guys the inside track on sort of how I secure guests. But I took a flyer. I heard Dave on an interview with Bill Simmons, and another big fan of Bill's and all that he does and the way in which he has sort of broken the mold in media. And I just thought Dave was a really likable guy, and he's doing something that I think is impacting the world for my kids and yours, and that I'd like to learn more about it. And his role in what I'm deeming as being a social impact entrepreneur. Dave, it's so nice to spend some time with you. That's quite a preamble to a guy who sort of changed the sports landscape to jumping into the climate solution discussion. Let's just start with sort of why. Why would you do this to yourself and your family?
Rod, thanks for having me. I tend to look at the world through, the lens of, what do I care a lot about and where do I see experiences that could be a lot better than how they, than what they currently are. And this was something where, broadly speaking, climate sustainability, how much friction there is for people to figure out how to sort of make changes and move towards a lifestyle that is less wasteful, or whatever their end goals are. It felt like it was just way too hard for too many people, and I felt like maybe my skill set was a good fit to work on the problem. And I've been so fortunate in life and in my personal life, my work life, when you have success earlier in your career, there is also this sort of daunting question of what the hell do I do with the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And for me, Bleacher Report um like a was my purpose, and it was my mission in life, in like a very, very uh just like through and through way. Like I put everything I had into it, and I'm sort of like, okay, this is over. What's next?
So how do you
And
look
I
back at that, Dave, when you think about so now being in the world of the cool down and impact that you are and your co-founders are working towards, do you do you think back to Bleacher Report and think that was very sort of driven by youth and pursuits that maybe matched that sort of day and age for you and your where you were in your life? Because these are two very different things. I mean, you could argue that sports does really help to, I mean, it's therapeutic for so many. And to be feel connected does give us some sense of not purpose, but you feel connected to a community, right? I mean, there are countless kids out there that potentially don't have great environments, but maybe they feel connected to these teams that make them feel good about sort of rooting for. I mean, we all know the passion, but how do you think in comparing now where you are and sort of, man, I can't believe I did Bleacher Report. Like you cracked the code.
Um, yeah, I mean, they're like sports have also like same life. I can't say enough about like the impact that sports have had on my life. Like, for many years before I ever thought of starting Bleacher Report, and I played every sport, and was obviously a sports junkie from a rooting and following standpoint. Yeah, good for society in so many ways. Um, the, you know, sports. Uh, Sports, I thought at the time when we were starting Bleacher Report, like the experience of being a sports fan, especially a fan of a lot of teams that didn't receive as much coverage. Uh, Being a younger sports fan, I just thought that, like, again, going back to my preamble at the start, I thought that there were experience like fans deserve better experiences than what they were getting. And so, like, I just viewed it as we were trying to solve a problem for people, and that was really fun for the most part to work on. I did it for almost 15 years, and I think that I saw the space. Um, some of it was us, some of it was others that came in. Like I think the space changed a ton, like from 2005 onto where it is at present. And in climate, like you could say that, sort of very different category, but at the same time, like there are a lot of gaps in the market. The experiences for people who are trying to do better are not as good as they should be, and a lot of the tactics and techniques we use to build Bleacher Report and to understand, like, how to leverage data to make the subject matter like more connective and relevant to people. It's like fundamentally the same stuff for the most part as what we did at Bleacher Report. It's just a different subject. So
Have you had to
uh,
shake that from a, I mean, were you the sports guy now with an idea about climate? Or did people understand you were really talking about solving a problem and connecting content to people in a personalized and purposeful manner?
Yeah, I think on that, it's like, to me, it's mostly like the proof's in the pudding. Like,
Mm.
if you either, you can go and get some good PR buzz and do a loud announcement, and that's all good. But you either build an audience that likes your product, and the business makes it or it doesn't. So it's like, to me, that's relatively like, uh, it's like, let's see how good you are and let's see if you can go do this. And I think, it was great that Bleacher Report was a big success, but that, it sort of guarantees nothing for the future. Um, and the cool down, for anybody who's never heard of it, we've been around for about 20 months at this point. We launched in July of 2022. Uh, um, the theme is basically like content and information around sort of like all things that are adjacent to sort of like a cleaner and better future. So how to lower pollution, how to be less wasteful, how to save money and pick up health benefits in the process. It's sort of just like, hey, a lot of families out there, a lot of young people who realize that there are better ways to do things than what we've traditionally been doing to date, and our economy is in the process of transforming in lots of positive ways, and we wanted to make it go faster. And so, the good news, there are a lot of people that are interested in that, like millions and millions of people, some of whom are seeing the impacts of extreme weather in more severe ways than others, and feel a sense of urgency to help promote change. So we've built an audience of 30 million monthly users in a relatively short amount of time. It took Bleacher Report about 6 years to get as big as the cooldown's gotten in a
20
year.
months.
And some of that is we've been able to build a really awesome team this time around from the beginning, of people who really know what they're doing. But the other piece of it is just, it's a market that hasn't been very well served, and there've been a lot of politics in the market, a lot of there's been a lot of sort of societal divide, and we've tried to avoid a lot of the BS there and just focusing on trying to help people, and it's resonating.
With me about how you've approached it, because you touched on some of those. I want to talk about sort of being apolitical and trying to stay out of a world where people are swirling and always asking if something is fake or if it's relevant information. And the climate space, for sure, sustainability has been, fraught with issues by, I think, naysayers and those with ulterior motives that I'm sure you're having to battle to some degree. When you first approached it, Dave, like, how do you not sit there and either say, was there a moment when you said, this is either too big to tackle, or almost like, where do you start? Because I think for most, any climate discussion or around sustainability, innovation has been very intellectually based, and or sort of, it couched for like one or what felt like a very small community. Now,
Yeah.
I'll give a backdrop. I've done a lot of traveling to the Nordics. Sustainability, everything you're talking about, is discussed 7 days a week between young and old, at the coffee shop, at a train station. It is very different than it is here in the US. And so I would think that, if you and I were talking and you're in Stockholm right now, I would say, well, that makes perfect sense. Dave is surrounded by these conversations and sort of a willing audience. When you first started thinking about this with your co-founders, with Ryan and Anna, was there a moment of, God, we know we can do this, we've got the backgrounds, but God, this is a huge, huge challenge?
Yeah, I spent almost a year sort of like researching and pressure testing the concept before moving forward with the business. And that was different from Bleacher Report, where I had no idea what I was doing, and we just sort of like threw ourselves into the pool to see what would happen. I had a passion for the space. I had some observations around gaps, and again, experiences that should be a lot better for real people than they are. But yeah, there were a lot of questions around, could you do it in a way where it didn't feel politically divisive? Could you get to audience scale? Like, could you make the topics like, actually compelling and interesting and helpful to people, versus, a lot of the content that people see that sort of connects to climate, for example, it'll be around, bad news events. There's a hurricane, there's a fire, there's a heat wave, and it's often accompanied by sort of doom and gloom research reports around numbers in Celsius that don't necessarily sort of like worked that well on a lot of people who grew up in the United States as brains, and the subject just sort of goes in one ear out the other. And um, and for other people, it leaves them feeling, not very good about, the future or the society they live in, and leads to sort of a lot of paralysis around like, oh, this is hopeless. And so, yeah, I think the the communication strategies over the past like 20 years that have tried to maybe prompt people to sort of do things differently out of fear, just like have proven to not be very successful for most of our society in the United States. And I think that was just really clear from studying data. And the other thing that was really clear is I got intellectually curious about the space, is that like from a solution standpoint, big and small, like there are pro climate solutions in every single industry sector like imaginable. There's so many cool things out there, and like as I learn more and more about the technology side and just like the products that are coming and the services, and I was just like, this is like 100 times more interesting than I thought it would be. Like I learned about it because I felt like I needed to. I was living in San Francisco, too many wildfires, too much smoke. Like I wanted to understand what the hell was really going on. And as I did, it was like, this is just a lot. Like the future can be really awesome. Like the stuff that people are building, it's incredible, and it can be helpful to local communities and to individuals. I think in a way where most people like they're not spending hours and hours researching the stuff, and the information is just not getting to them in ways where like it really connects. And so we just wanted to make the whole subject matter and like the value propositions behind like, hey, here's why you should do this thing, where somebody reads it and they're like, yeah, like that would be great, that could save me a bunch of money, or like, gosh, I really wish my local community would do this, or oh, if we made this change, like that would, my kids would be a lot healthier. And so it's just like making changes that, yes, are ultimately better for the planet or the country or whatever it is, but are also like, oh, this is good for me as well. I'm not making a big sacrifice here. I'm not like spending $3,000 and sort of like, never understanding what the return is. That I think has been a struggle for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think people are reticent because they fear knowledge overload. What is the data revealing about that? Because you're right. I mean, one of the things I know a lot of people love about the cool down is obviously the newsletters. I mean, that you knew the mechanics of that, right? And how to integrate that in from everything that you learned at Bleacher Report. And that I would imagine is crushing it for you in the newsletters. I've got different ones from the cool down coming, and each time I scroll through that, I'm like, damn, that's interesting. And that's interesting. And maybe I ought to bring that up at dinner with my kids. So it definitely spurs my interest in that way. And I'm just wondering what the data says about sort of like how deep are people going when you give them something that is of interest? Is there a way that you're delivering the information that you find is sort of a welcome mat for them? Because sometimes I think that one of the reasons why people don't want to dive into some of these discussions is because they fear that they're not, I'm saying this, you're not saying this, smart enough, or that they don't have the knowledge base to kind of be able to digest what in the world they're reading. And maybe that's because academics were always putting out the information.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Just like how the information is delivered to people, the voice. Like we're trying to write the newsletter as though like, your cool neighbor that you trust is just somebody who's into the subject matter, but also sort of learning it for the first, like there may be like a couple steps ahead of you, and they've pressure tested some of the stuff, but we're not trying to come at you from the perspective of saying like, we're a climate scientist and we're in the lab and we're telling you need to do this. So one of the lessons we've learned, broadly speaking, is that most people value the opinion of their friends and trusted neighbors and family members, and they want people who sort of can see life from their shoes, giving them affirmation that like, hey, this is a smart thing to try, and here's why. I think there is a lack of trust at times from sort of like hearing things you know, from some like distant laboratory that's very far away from sort of your real life. So like, yeah, our newsletters have been a huge hit so far. We launched the beginning of last year. We now have almost 300,000 subscribers to the newsletters, incredible engagement. And so that's really proud of that, of like, okay, like we can deliver this information to people in a way where they're finding it to be useful and actionable. And also we can sort of help them to, for a lot of things, to say, like, you're not the first person who's trying this. Like, you're not going to be a sucker who's like a super early adopter who's going to get left with something that doesn't work that well, or there was a gotcha and you're actually going to lose money, or like a lot of these things are like, no, they're like, there are millions of people already doing this and having success with it. You might just not have heard about it yet, or nobody's explained it to you in a way that's, you know, where it's sort of like easy to understand the value prop. So I think that's just like the social proof element of just saying like, no, this is becoming a new normal. And in general, like normalizing these types of actions and behaviors for people of like, oh, like, you know, if I'm a parent, like I want to raise my kids to, you know, to compost, because now I understand that when I throw, you know, food waste in the garbage, it doesn't break down very well and just turns into methane gas, and that's not good. So like composting is the new recycling, and like I get it, and my neighbors are doing it, or whatever the thing is. People are way more likely to adopt it if they don't feel like they're sort of like the weirdo who's trying the new thing that may actually be stupid.
I love that approach, the cool neighbor. How do you, Dave, how do you maintain neutrality? I would think that this would be a challenge, not because that's not what you're working to do, right? But it's like there was, and I know Instagram is really big for the cool down as well. And there was a story in there which really got me thinking. It was about environmental education and the plastic industry, and how you've got this, the one who was mentioning this thing called Plastivan, and it's like they're taking sort of the knock on plastics and now sort of inverting it and trying to talk about all these amazing benefits of plastics. And I would think that you're either welcomed in some of those boardrooms or they're terrified of you. But either way, they're going to have to make a decision about how to approach a much more informed public about the impact of their products on not only our lives, but on sort of the health and well-being of the planet. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of threading that needle in a way that, I mean, it's like oil and gas. I mean, look at the things that
Yeah.
they
I mean,
support or, they get behind.
yeah. Uh, the um, sort of the facts of like oil and gas industry are that by burning fossil fuels, it creates a lot of carbon pollution that gets stuck in our atmosphere for a really long time and is contributing to warming our planet. Also gets sucked up in the ocean and is warming the ocean. All sorts of things, like those are facts. They're just things that are happening. Plastic, uh, plastic isn't great. Like a lot of people know at this point, like um, in the United States, for all of our efforts to recycle plastic, only about 5% of our plastic actually gets recycled. It's really disgusting and sad. Plastic sheds, so like they're microplastics at this point, like everywhere. Like I said this in the Simmons podcast, but like you can read a lot of estimates online that like an average adult has maybe like a credit card's worth of plastic in their bodies at this point. No, I think nobody really knows if that's bad for you or not, but like I don't think anybody wants like a bunch of plastic in their body either. Yes, the flip side is there have been a lot of benefits from burning fossil fuels, lots and lots, airplanes, cars, and all the goodness that's come from that. Plastics are in so many things, like in our most of our clothing has plastic in it, for example. So like there's a lot of goodness that's come um, from these things that also have negative externalities. I, I think to me, uh, one mistake that I would say sort of like the super progressive far left climate community has made is basically saying like this is all evil and we need to halt it
Right.
immediately. And I understand where they're coming from. I'm sympathetic, but I don't. If the end goal strategically is uh, to create as much progress as possible, I don't think that's like proved to be the best method. I think what we do need to do is we need to lower pollution as much as we can, and we need to pursue solutions that are financially viable and are fundamentally sort of like a step forward and better and cleaner. There are lots of those solutions. Some of them are great. Some of them are better than the existing ones. Um, some of them have their own pitfalls. They all sort of need to be, discussed individually. But I think with oil and gas, for example, it's like we would never like promote oil and gas as a solution for anything. At the same time, like there's shades of gray where uh, you know I understand where many conservative politicians in the U.S. who are sort of pro climate are coming from, where they want more oil production to happen in the U.S. because that process is fundamentally cleaner and better than shipping oil from the Middle East. And so it's like, again, there are a lot of shades here where um, like some progress is going to be incremental and some progress is going to be exponential. And I fundamentally are sort of, I'm like for as much progress as possible, but uh, it's hard for me um, to see us making that much progress if like the fossil fuel industry and the plastics industry, which is sort of one and the same thing, uh, end up doing things like anywhere near the status quo. Like we're going to need big sweeping change in our lifetime.
Is it difficult to stay out of the political fray? I mean, just talking about editorial guidelines, or I just would think you're having a different discussion as a group, potentially on the information that is out there. So that, I mean, it's sort of like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Because to your point, you get extremists on either side that are either going to love what you have or think that they're not included. Does that impact sort of the content or the discussion on what content gets distributed and in what format?
Yeah, it does. It's something we talk a lot about. Um, at the same time, we are uh, we are especially focused on solutions and on things that real people can sort of do in their own lives, and or things that like they could get behind sort of societally. Uh, we are not sort of like telling people how to vote, or we're not campaigning against individual companies. We will if there's a corporation that does something that is newsworthy because uh, they lied or they did something extremely wasteful, or like we'll cover it. But we're sort of like we're not in like the gotcha business where we're sort of like trying to seek out every bad thing that every company does. Uh, so I think for us, our North Star is trying to be as helpful as possible to sort of like mainstream America and help people who want to live a lifestyle themselves, but like more so like they want their communities and they want the society that they live in to make a lot of progress towards being cleaner and sort of better in years to come. Like that's like we're just focused on serving those people as best as possible, and like you don't you don't have to sort of be political when you're exposing people to specific solutions. If they want to make it political themselves, like that's their decision, but we don't need to do that for them. And by the way, there are lots and lots and lots of solutions and technologies that people who are left and right, will agree on 9 times out of 10. So there's more common ground than people think once you sort of like get down to the uh, sort of like the practical application level.
Is Gen Z, if we talk about audience, is Gen Z sort of a natural landing spot or target for who would be sort of a native to the cool down? I mean, their purpose over profits. Recent research has said that when they leave their first job, over half of them are leaving, not because of pay disparity. They're leaving because of the companies that they've been working for. they don't represent their values, and especially around
Yeah.
sustainability. And I'm just wondering, it seems like a sweet spot for you that if it's sort of like drop it and let it grow, it would be Gen Z.
Yeah. I mean, it's always like when you have these generational like disconnects over history, it's really interesting to see what happens. Like in our parents or grandparents, years or whatever, like, big, uh, you know, going from sort of like the, post-war 1950s white picket fence era to the 60s, big changes.
Yeah.
It does feel like um, there's a huge values gap amongst like pretty big populations in this country right now. And I'm very excited to see what Gen Z does as folks in that generation uh, do innovative things and come into positions of power, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Like for sure, we are hopefully part of uh, what can arm that generation with great information, so that they can sort of better understand, especially at a solutions level, what actually can be done. Because it is one thing to sort of live in philosophical, in a vacuum land, and sort of snap your fingers and say like, well, you know, these evil corporations, or these, this and that, without sort of understanding like, like the economy is sort of dependent on some of these things. And if you got rid of all of them, like, you might not actually be that psyched. So, um,
Right.
uh, there's that dynamic to it of like, we want to educate people of all ages about uh, the dynamics a little bit closer to the ground. That said, like, we actually have been more focused strategically uh, on age demos that are sort of already making these life decisions. So, folks who are like sort of like late 20s through late 40s, even into their mid 50s, who are uh, either thinking about purchasing a home, or have purchased a home, or who are renters but have the ability to make some changes in their apartments that would be impactful for their health, or for cost savings, but ultimately sort of like good for the environment. And so that right now is our sweet spot, which are sort of like the folks who sort of like have their hands on the steering wheel for the most part. I think Gen Z is very likely to sort of do better than my generation, just in this realm.
I would agree. Uh, how comfortable are you with your notoriety? And I don't mean it as sort of a surface level question. What I mean is as a recognizable name who has an impact now in different areas of people's lives. I would guess that as young people are thinking about being entrepreneurs, I spoke at a school last week and I was telling the audience that I don't think even we're going to be saying social entrepreneurs. I just think it's going to be a sort of embedded, right? At some point, we're going to get rid of that label and it's going to be you want to be responsible as someone who's innovating around an idea that you and others have. Um, they're going to be looking for people to either emulate or to at least sort of as a North Star to some degree, right? I think we've all done that. Where are you in your comfort level of being a name that people recognize, and or that there's some level of responsibility that, you doing well and Anna and Ryan with the cool down is impactful, not just for the cool down, but for young people that are thinking about what their, in essence, cool down or Bleacher Report might be. How do you think about that?
Headroom is produced by Old Soul, a one stop marketing agency that understands the power of brand and nuance. Reach out to my guy Matt at Old Soul and supercharge your brand and content strategy. That's Old Soul. Shoot Matt a note at aoldsoul.com. That's AOLDSOUL.com. And now, back to our guest.
I candidly, like, I would say it's not something I think a ton about. Though I'll say that it, like, when I've had a chance to speak at schools, whether they're like universities or high schools, mostly about sort of like the sports era stuff, to sort of like see firsthand how how much, people in the room sort of connect with something that was just like a little like hope and a dream that I thought up in my, college apartment, and that like stuff like that is really, really cool. And I guess I would just say that like I hope that like my dream for, for this company is that it changes a lot of people's lives in like very, very small ways, but that there are some bigger unexpected things that happen, that they're like, who knows, there's some, you know, 15-year-old kid who reads something on the cool down or watches something and it sparks some idea and some great thing happens out of it. Like I think that's like the dream of what you want to happen. You have no control over it, but it's just sort of this like, you know, it's like if we influence enough people, maybe amazing things will happen. Uh, I I'm very supportive of, of any and all entrepreneurs that use, the tool sets and access, or whatever you have at your disposal, um, to try to make a difference in people's lives in a positive way. It's like a little cliche to say, but I think especially folks who've been fortunate enough and have earned the right, to have had some success. Uh, um, I th- I think you're right that you'll see more and more people who feel like, I don't know if they have a responsibility to do something like that. Like it's their lives; they can do whatever they want. But um, I think that you'll see more and more people who feel a very strong like pull to try to, take what they've learned and take their financial success and to try to pay it back, sort of. So that's, I don't know. That's
It's
like
not a terribly comfortable space for you, is it?
uh,
And which I
I'm,
appreciate.
I'm
There's a humility
yeah,
to it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I
That's
appreciate that.
the
There are a
way
lot
to
of
put
people
it.
who
Yeah,
stand on a stage and say, I've always dreamed of making a difference, right? And I don't think that's authentic. I mean, who doesn't want to, I guess, leave a positive legacy, but it's not something that drives them maybe every day. And so I can appreciate that it's not a place of comfort that, that's sort of your brand, right? I don't get that from you. And that's a compliment.
uh, yeah. I'm just like a 40-year-old guy who's married with a couple kids and trying to trying to live a happy, healthy life, one day at a time over here, and also work on some stuff
So is the headline for you the accidental role model? That's what comes to my mind.
I have never like really thought about the idea of being a role model. So you're introducing me to a whole new. I'm not sold that has happened yet, nor
Well,
nor
that
is
would
it.
just go along with the headline, Dave.
Yeah,
That's just
this is where I've joked with my co-founder Anna, who uh, um, does sort of most of the external facing PR for the company, that like my goal, for this company is to make her, who've joked, sustainably famous. But that is for her, not for me. I have never wanted. I like, my nightmare in life is to like walk down the street and have somebody know who I am, which I don't think will ever happen either. But
oh,
that's not something that I would ever aspire towards. So
let's
that's a difference between me and Gen Z right there.
there you go. There you go. There's a difference. All right, so let's put a wrap on this. The proverbial sort of what's next. I mean, are we looking at, I would think when you're having over 30 million, right, a month, that audience is going to want not just more information, but I maybe expanded ways in which to capture information or to tell stories, because you become a trusted source, right, of information. And it's like anything. Once you trust something, it's like we were talking about Simmons earlier, right? Oh, he says watch something. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll check that out because
Yeah.
I've listened to him every week for years now. So what's the dream in the, I'll use the term, you don't have to, but the storytelling around the cool down?
Yeah. We look at it like this. Everybody's sort of like get their own phase in like their own personal journey around climate and sustainability, whether they think about it that way or not. Somebody, like, they might be in the phase where they recycle glass bottles and don't do anything else. Somebody else might have electrified their home at this point and are now going to start a farm in their backyard. Like people are all at different points in their personal journeys, and we're trying to create experiences so that we can help, like regardless of where you're sort of like entering, that we can help you as much as possible by um, breaking the steps down for you, so you don't have to go and spend like hours and hours and researching like what the hell should I do about this. Like we just want to make it as easy as possible. So yeah, we have big improvements that are coming sort of like at a community level, especially. So like we want to give better access to, like, um, if you are trying to make your home more energy efficient because you want to save money, or you're concerned about carbon emissions or whatever it is, somewhere in between those things. Um, like we're launching a guide product that makes it really easy for you to sort of like dive in and actually like figure out what you could be doing sort of in your specific situation, and then see what other people in the community have done. So you can sort of see like, okay, this person tried this strategy or this product, and like, and here's what they're saying about it, where it's sort of like, there might be a recommendation from the cool down where we're sort of saying, hey, like, we're behind this thing, here's why. But also where there's like some proof of some social proof where you can say, look, here are real life people who tried it, who are community members just like you. And we'll launch some user generated content elements. You can like sort of see how people have tried things. And yeah, we're trying to make these journeys as sort of accessible as possible, and just make it easier for people. So that's a big part of where we're going next. And then we on our end will be able to see what's working. Like we'll try some journeys. I'm sure that, like, on step 2 we'll see massive drop off, and it's like, okay, like this is how we're trying. This is it's not working. Do we need to go back to the drawing board, or emphasize this less, or figure out sort of like which parts of it aren't resonating? And so that's like that's a big part of the next year for us, is just like really, really honing in on like what moves people to actually make these changes, and what benefits do they actually see from them, and then be able to take those learnings and make them useful to even more people.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the cool down. I'm hooked now. I've got my newsletters. I'd absolutely recommend people check it out. And what I enjoy about it, I've got bite-sized opportunities to learn something that I didn't, right, in that given moment, and then apply that in the world that I occupy. And I think that's the little part that we can all do. I love the accidental role model. I'm gonna roll with that, Dave. But you're a terribly likable guy, and I'm rooting for you. And selfishly, it's for my kids, and the planet that we're handing to them, and all my friends around the world. We want to thank Dave Finocchio. He is the co-founder and CEO of The Cool Down. You can check it out at thecooldown.com. And like I said, they've got a bunch of newsletters. Sign up for all of them, see what works for you. And I promise you, you'll be better informed, and you'll feel more purposeful with your family and the communities that you live in. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger. Well, I hope that this far-reaching discussion, touching sort of each side of really the cool down and the people behind the cool down and Dave's personality, I hope that came through the airwaves, as they say. And didn't you love what I did? Not that I said it, but just the response when I just sort of labeled Dave as the accidental role model. Um, this is where the power of audio may or may not have been as powerful as I would have liked, because it was just fascinating to see somebody who's so incredibly accomplished and not sort of resting on his laurels at all, though he could have, um, a little uncomfortable, but in a wonderful way, when I called him a role model, and an accidental one at that. Um, but you know what? I think that the Dave Finocchios of the world are going to be those that represent the roster of role models for the next generation, because they're all going to be social entrepreneurs, as I said in the interview. And they're going to want to understand how to ask really big questions, how to tackle what seem to be insurmountable problems, and do so with grace, humility, and incredible execution. And that, if anything, and we didn't really maybe dive into the execution of what they've done at the cool down, but my goodness, if you've got 30 million people a month that are coming to learn from what you have to offer and what you've pulled together, you are executing at an incredibly high level. This was just a treat of an interview for me. So again, I'm not going to deny the selfishness of capturing this interview because of my initial fandom and support of Bleacher Report, and then sort of going down the trail of Dave and hearing him on Bill Simmons' podcast while I was working out and thinking, man, this guy is really, really fascinating, and I want to know more. He took a flyer on me, and I hope that that flyer has benefited you, because I know that it has me. Until next time.
Thanks for taking the plunge into Headroom, where we uncover the why behind the what and who impacting our lives. Headroom is a production of Rainlight and co-produced by our friends at Old Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Rod Berger, and this is Headroom.